I'm Ellen Killow, Development Director with the Jewel Collins Smith Museum of Fine Art at Auburn University. For the 2020 academic year, we proudly present a programmatic lineup honoring the Women's Vote Centennial. From exhibitions to artist engagements like tonight, this is a nationwide celebration of the cultural contributions of women. As this year-long observance draws to a close, there are meaningful opportunities to increase representation in our permanent collections and foster a better Auburn for all. 1072, a campaign for collecting and conserving art, is dedicated to securing works by women of color to expand the art history narrative. So far, we are committed to acquiring pieces by Emma Amos and Deborah Roberts, to name but a few, both of which will travel across the country. Through interpretation at home, the Jewel actively contributes to the intellectual life of the university and beyond. You can support this effort at auburnGiving.org/art20. Once more, auburnGiving.org/art20. Thank you to those who have contributed to date. I would also like to acknowledge our campus partners tonight in the Department of English for tonight's presentation, our supporters watching, and the Alabama State Council on the Arts, who provide funding for this literary arts program. And now, I'm pleased to introduce graduate teaching assistant, Callista Malone.
Nicole Terez Dutton comes to us tonight from Boston, Massachusetts, where she teaches at Emerson College's writing program and the Solstice Low Residency MFA program. Dutton, previously the editor of Transition Magazine and the Du Bois Review and the poetry editor of The Baffler, is now the new editor of the Kenyon Review. She said of working on magazines, "I love working with writers to help them finalize their vision and get the best possible version of their work into the world. People turn to literature for solace, clarity, and guidance. So the role of the journal then becomes to bring language and song to others in a moment of global loss and uncertainty, as both balm and brightness, and also to inspire and support the writers who are doing this work." Dutton received her MFA from Brown University and has a number of honors to her name: fellowships from the Frost Place, the Fine Arts Works Center, the Broad Loaf Writers Conference, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Her work is in a number of notable magazines like Callaloo, Plowshares, 32 Poems, the Indiana Review, and Salt Hill Journal, and her debut collection of poems, If One of Us Should Fall, won the 2011 Cave Canam Poetry Prize. Major Jackson, Terrence Hayes, and Patricia Smith all raved about her book. Smith said, "Nicole Terez Dutton's fierce and formidable debut throbs with a restless beauty and a lyrical undercurrent that is both empowered and unpredictable. Every poem is unsettling in a delicious way that changes and challenges the reader. There is nothing here that does not hurtle forward." Please join me in welcoming Nicole Terez Dutton.
Hi there. Thank you, Callista, for the introduction, and thank you all for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to start with a poem called Elements, and I start with this because this is a travel poem, and I feel like I used to be so concerned with the time between here and there, and now that we're in lockdown, that sense of time is really different, and the sense of travel is obviously really, really different, and so it's a much more interior space that I think I'm writing within. But we'll start with this movement, and we'll start on the road. This poem called Elements. There must be a train station never arrived at, smoky boxcar teak and rum, a dark Jamaican who won't say a lot, eyes, small dimes behind frames, furniture heavy but attentive to a woman speaking in oboes, clay Florida moons under her nails. Think agreement, bouquets beneath polyester, and somewhere between Rochester and Milwaukee, eyes latch and hold, possibly baseball cards, a pint of hot damn, or cardboard towns scraping dark landscapes by. Think someone nearly gorgeous, a name without a saint, loyal to the Mets, an optimist. Ways we fall asleep, hands entwined, crook to crook rocking. Some dreams, they don't arrive on the backs of tossing ponies, but for now, everything is beginning. The boxcar and muscular silk against closed eyes, his sleepy way of guessing the number of miles by the dust in her hair. I'm going to read a newer poem, and this is a poem called Magnitude and Bond. More than anything, I need this boy so close to my ears, his questions electric as honeybees, an acreage of goldenrod and aster. Time, where we are, is slow sugar in the veins of white pine, rubbery mushrooms cloistered at their feet. His tawny listening at the water's edge, shy antlers in pooling green light, fox prints etched in clay. I need more little black boys to be able to be little black boys, whole saltwater galaxies in cotton and loudness, not fixed in stunned suspension, episodes on hot asphalt, waiting in the dazzling absence of apology. I need this kid to stay mighty and coltish, thundering alongside other black kids, the wrestle and whoop, the brightness of it. I need for the world to bear it. And until it will, may the trees kneel closer while we sit together in mineral hush. May the nearness grow roots and canopy, hold us soft as tender shoots against a windy distance. May the boy whose dark eyes are an echo of my father's dark eyes reach with cupped hands into the braided current. The boy, restless and lanky, the boy who has memorized the beetle's lacquered armor, each furrowed seed, this delicate thread of water. The boy, for the attention he pours into every heartbeat. The boy who once told me, the world gives you second chances. This boy tugging my arm, saying, look, saying, now. So I wrote that poem. I wrote that poem for my father and for my son, who, my son reminds me a great deal of my father. But then also my father is someone who, is an outdoor boy at the end of the day, even though he was definitely a city kid growing up. And I inherited it, and my son inherited his great love of the outdoors. The you in this poem, Major Jackson, who was mentioned at the beginning in the Callista's intro. Major Jackson at one point told me, he looked through my manuscript and he said, all of these poems are written to this you. Like, who is this you? You got to think about that. And that he was right. He was right. And so I tamped down on the you, but I did do some consideration of who the you might be. So this poem is called The You in this poem. Doesn't have to try hard to be the one, raw with trumpets and lightning broken across a crowded room, something we're all brighter and suddenly foreign for, as if we'd forgotten the archipelago of our bodies or the salt in all directions calling out our name. The you in this poem doesn't so much speak as stir a darkness of loosened feathers, claws and tendrilled weather upon our eyes and open mouths. No telling why the music carries or what might pry the ribs open. I am not sure which equation might rescue you from your own skin. I'm saying I like sky when you speak it. I'll never care which latitude. Even if you leave your body by the roadside for the crickets, I will recognize the spine, bowed as Herodotus beneath its story, the sore knees, the bruised and perfect mouth. I know just how to find you. No matter what the distance, I will hear the pasture singing back our voices, a blade of grass for every tongue. This poem is called Gig. Gig. Their lives are better without you. Look at the moon faces and raised champagne glasses in this photograph, the dismantled flowers on the church steps. He married last week, and the girl, when you meet her, is well-ironed and kind. Good thing Austin is just one in a string of occasional places, and you, a girl with a Stratocaster growling mud and chrome into microphones, you can't stick around long. After the set, you will all be a litany of vectored facts, talking a scalloped edge around the sweet tea. 6 eyes, parsing the distances between then and now, more creased, more safe, more of each of you. What is there to speak? You are alive within the memory of your own skin. You will be whatever creation you choose for the onstage hour, eyes moldering or not, heart lurching or not. Tomorrow is another town with contracts and cheese danishes. But tonight, play them a broom jump. Call it, wear out, be new. I'm going to read one poem off of my computer screen, and I hope I can do this without messing it up. So bear with me for just a moment. Okay. This poem is called Detroit in the Year of Cicadas. I am a name with small hands, just a notion moving past the picture windows. The clouds within the bones of my chest crumble a little more each day. Since they cut the electric, the streets crowd with half-starved dogs. We stay inside. The police don't come, won't come, and everything is wartime portions, a way of making do. So when I hear her cry out, I enter her house through the side door. He wants money, the copper in the pipes, jewelry, some silver dollars holed up in a shoebox or wrapped in a velvet pouch beneath floorboards. Whatever it is he thinks silly old women like us keep in our dark bread boxes and unheated homes. I stand just beyond the sweat of him, the itch half hidden beneath his dungarees. No one pays attention to reliable, ordinary things, the well-oiled door, the cast iron skillet on the stove, heavy enough for most purposes. When I bring it down against his head, he crumples to the floor, limbs splayed like a marionette. Outside, the sky is the color of pears, and my voice, like the cicadas, whose hard black bodies will rain for weeks from the trees, is suddenly everywhere. It stuns itself against the wainscoting, the wooden spoons, urgent and unsatisfied, touching everything it can. Okay. I'm going to read 2 more poems. This is a poem actually that I wrote, and when I was, in subsequent readings and thinking about it, it's a poem that seemed to me to speak of my hometown and of Tamir Rice, who I always think about. And it reminded me, as I looked at this poem, it reminded me of the fact that there's a lot of kind of cultural understanding that water has memory, and also just this notion that memory is actually something that carries and is carried within your body, and that is maybe something that is carried down from generation to generation. So all of those things, all of those ideas seem to have a home or have a resonance in this poem. It's called It's All True. Let's say I'm saying, when I love you, I'm admiring the fingerprints of every hand that has touched you. Time is radiant, vectored in all directions, and the larger issue is a little regard for straight lines. Breath coming into this idea deeper than Ice Age pushes against the same molecules. Even my saying it alters the speed light takes to reach your retina, reverses and reverses again my dimensions before you. It is dynamic, this now. We touch and touch and touch. This being, again, my voice speaking into the cool green where fog sets its soft weight. My voice, again, asking the switchbacks, which syllable is not daylight? Which syllable is sleep? And the last poem I want to read is called Let Us Stay. And I'd like to end on a little bit of a hopeful note. I know this is a really hard time and people are struggling, but I have to say that this summer, with all of the terrible news and all of the difficulty and all of the loss, I have to say that I did notice that there were extraordinary kindnesses and extraordinary acts of courage and bravery and people coming together. And that was really heartening and beautiful to see. So that is something that I hold on to, and that does carry me. And I hope that you all have that hope within you as well. Let us stay. Let there be soft space in the outcome, a possibility we might overgrow our borders, become whole counties of light. Let us remember this season, our chins tucked, our hard lean into gray wind. Let the heart grow rich with moss. Let it have no footprints. Let the sun bleach the bones of words we no longer need. Let the birds sing in orange and red. Let our voices be cathedral. Let the underfoot miles go. Let everything we touch name us. Let that be a long kiss. Let us stay kindled, sharpened, ready. Let us find new ways to enter the music. Let us stay until Sirius skips his scorched heart like a stone through the last spokes of darkness. Thank you. I think you're still muted.
There you go. Thanks. That wonderful reading. What a great note to end on there, that poem. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks,
We'll
Justin.
do a little Q&A now. If people have questions that they want to type in, that's great. I'll start one off with your first poem. You said something about this when you were introducing the poem, but I was just wondering how the pandemic, has that had an effect on your creative process, on the work you've been producing?
Yeah, I think it definitely has. And for me, it's been really just, I realize so much of the poem work now, more than it was before, is really just even trying to figure out what the thought is. Like I just feel like I've been moving and just, there's a frenzy and there's a fear that I think is kind of silencing. But I think more than that, it kind of overtakes, um, it overtakes language somehow, and it makes it difficult to find the stillness of mind and body. And also, just now that work and life are all kind of like compressed into the same physical space, it's hard to find that silence that you can create out of or think into, to make a poem happen. And I feel like I'm a really slow writer, and even when there's not a pandemic, I'm pretty slow. And so I do feel the urgency of everything, and also just kind of the gravity of everything has made me feel very quiet and contemplative. And I feel like I have lots of notes all over my desk and all over, notebooks and everything, but I feel like I'm just now in the process of trying to actually build poems.
Great. We've got a question here in the chat. What led you to poetry?
What led me to poetry? I grew up, my mom loves poetry, and has always loved poetry. And so I grew up in a house full of books and people who love literature and poetry. So it was just really, that was pretty easy. So I would say that's my mom, who really was the first person to introduce me to poetry. And then I will say that, I started writing at a really young age, just kind of tinkering around. And then Mary Oliver, who's an Ohio poet, came to our school and read poems to us. And it was just such a remarkable thing to me to be able to actually interact with a writer and a poet. And I definitely remember kind of the experience that she brought to reading those poems, and realizing, well, this is a whole other element and aspect of the work. I mean, it was elevated. It was just an entirely different experience, that she made of those poems just by singing into them. And so that was really powerful. And was really powerful.
What age were you when, if you remember, when Mary Oliver came to your class?
I was in middle school, so maybe sixth or seventh grade.
Great. We have another question for you. What is your creative habit?
Well, I feel like I have a lot. I try to have a lot of creative habits, but I guess one of the things is to write things down, even if I don't feel like they're ready to be written down, because I will forget them. So that's one creative habit that I have developed over time. I definitely will fly out of my head, and it's like a dream, never to be remembered, if not documented. And so I've gotten into the habit of writing any little fragment of a piece of a thought, or even if it's just language, because often just kind of like the racket of words alone is cool enough that, you know, you want to hold on to that and remember it, and maybe just come back to it later. So I would say that's a habit that I've been cultivating for a long time.
That's a really great habit. I have the faulty sense that I will remember it, that I don't have to write it down right now, but I need more of your habit. What poetry have you been reading during the pandemic? What do you have? Everyone's in need of more books to read. What do you recommend?
I recommend anything by Lucille Clifton, because she's extraordinary, and everything she says is worth listening to, and it's always true. So she's an amazing North Star. I would say Rita Dove is also, I think, someone extraordinary. Not just because she's an Ohio poet, but because she's someone who's really interested in language, and also interested, like, she's got an international sensibility, and I think she's pretty adventurous, I'd say, kind of in the way that she tackles poems. I've been reading Natalie Diaz, who I think is also just is brave and really, I think she's really attentive, and I think her images are gorgeous, but I think she strikes me as, she says what needs saying. Solmaz Sharif is another person who's like that, just extraordinarily clear in her thinking and brave with what she takes on, and the way that she's willing to let the language, or to build poems that let the language do the work. And I think that a lot of the work that both of those women are doing, it's historical work, it's reclamation, it's incredibly potent, political, and urgently necessary work.
Great. Another question here from the chat. How did your idea of you evolve as you write?
My idea of myself, or the you in that poem? Oh.
I think your idea of yourself, how has that evolved as you write, as you have written?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't have an immediate answer for that. I mean, I feel like the poem, like I said before, the poem is so often me trying to pin down the actual thought, and it's sort of the progress of a thought, sort of the map of that. And so the poem feels to me like the receipt for my having gone through the process of, like, been able to, like, figure out the language to convey this thought or the idea. And I'm not quite sure, that feels somehow, it's definitely my way of processing and considering the world, but it feels removed from me at the same time. It feels like a project that somehow the stuff of my experience in my mind. But so I'm not sure that I think about the poems as related to me so much, or holding me, or ideas of me. But I have to think about that some more. I love that question. I feel like
that was a great answer, though. I like the idea that it doesn't necessarily seem to be you on the page.
No, it doesn't seem to have quite that relationship.
Okay. How do you handle the editing process? I'm assuming that's your own work, not your. I think.
I'll think about it first in terms of my work, and then I'll think about it in terms of my professional work. And I'll say, for my work, I love editing. I'll edit forever. This book that I was just reading out of is, like, covered in I'm still editing those poems. I know I need to leave it alone, probably should leave it alone, can't be left alone. So I love revising and constantly kind of working through something and building new poems out of the kindling of old poems. I love that. And I I think that's my safe space. So it's with effort that I remove myself and call something finished, and move forward. So I think that's important too, to understand when a poem is actually, when it's done, and then when it's time to start the next poem. You can't hang out in one poem forever. And then in terms of my work, I feel like, you know, I love my work. It's all of my favorite things. It's looking at literature. It's an opportunity to kind of be able to help people make space for their words in the world. And then also, you know, my role right now, it's a really, really beautiful opportunity to kind of expand the conversation and what's happening in literature. And you know, my hope is to be inviting, and my hope also is to be inspiring and to help, you know, help evolve things the way, so that they can just really just live and sing and breathe as their authors intended them to.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for young poets?
Yeah, I would say read everything, and read everything, especially poetry. And I would also say that one of the things that I find, and I think this is really true of all literature, but I think it's particularly true of poetry, is that there's nothing that you can't do in poetry. So you can build a form for yourself, you know, for your ideas. You can do whatever you want. There's no wrong answer. And so I would say it's pretty important to pay attention and to be a keen observer, both of other people's poems, but of your own experience, and to be present so that you have ideas and you have things that you want to convey. And I would also say in the same time to really honor what your interests are. So sometimes I see, like in my work in particular, I see poems that people feel like that sound smart, or poems that feel like they're legit poems. And I think that there's a real difference when something is an authentic, kind of close, like, piece of your heart that you've corralled into language and put on the page and offered into kind of this other larger kind of world of poetry. That feels different. And I don't know, I can't define what that difference is, but I would say you always want to be writing from exactly where you are, and not try to be anything on the page or otherwise than who you are, where you are as you're writing.
Thanks for that advice. We got time for one last question, and this is related, I guess, to the previous one. How do you know when a poem is finished? When do you know to stop working on it?
Well, I've already noted that I'm a little wooden-headed when it comes to abandoning the poem, but I would say that a lot of, and maybe this is also related to what I just said about that, like, kind of writing the authentic poem. I think the poem is often an act of discovery. And, you know, if you already have the answer when you begin, then that makes the journey obvious. That's not as profitable a journey as actually going the distance to find the answer, or to suss something out, or to do the research in your mind and with the language to build the poem. And I think that I think often a poem that is finished, you have everything that you came for. You know, often you don't know what you're looking for when you set out, but there is a point where you have arrived, and where there's nothing more that you can learn from the experience of trying to build this poem, and you've accomplished whatever ambition you've discovered that you have for the poem along the way. So then I think you're done.
I think that's a great answer. Okay, thanks again for the reading and for the Q&A. Please check out Nicole's book, If One of Us Should Fall, as well as the Jewel Collins Smith website of announcements for our schedule for the 2021 Third Thursday Poetry Series reading and online workshops, which should be announced before the new year. And with that, I'm going to transfer things over to Ellen.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. That was wonderful. And again, a special thanks to our college partners, patrons, and the Alabama Council on the Arts. The museum is open to the public during our regular hours, but with reduced occupancy right now. featuring selections by John James Audubon, posters from the School of the Visual Arts in New York, large-scale sculpture in Out of the Box, and the fantastic traveling exhibition L'Officio Magna, The Passion for French Posters. We invite you to sign up for our email list at jcsm.auburn.edu to learn more about the exciting exhibitions and poetry readings in store for 2021. Until then, good night.